All right. And hello out there, everyone. And welcome to today's session with Oliver Blue, your temporary guide, your friend, your brother, your one self that we share. Welcome again. And today we're going to be taking another giant leap, another giant step up the ladder of truth, up the ladder of reality. Never to look back, never to fall down. And I am so excited. I am so delighted to be your host. And I am so happy that we founded Truly Foundation, a nonprofit organization for the sole purpose of providing these advanced spiritual teachings to raise the awareness, to ignite the recognition of all humanity, to look within and see this great, tremendous light that is within all of us, to begin to explore the endless, boundless, unlimited, absolute, incredible creation that we are, birthed out of the one will of our Creator, making him or it or she, or we don't do genders here, but making our identification so clear and so plain that it begins to transform everything around us. It begins to give us a perception and a perspective and a point of reference and a point of view that is constant, that is sure, that is absolute. Because we embrace and accept the reality that only the will of God is pervading all things, that many are the plans that was dreamed up in the hearts of humanity. But it is the purposes of God, it is the will of God that is prevailing and will always prevail. And so we open ourselves up today to the idea in Workbook Lesson 152. And I'm telling you, coming off of this last review session and enter into this next 20 days of expanded awareness, we have that review session really did prepare us and ready our mind. Have really allowed our minds to be calm and at ease, really allowed our minds to finally relax and release that which had the mind full of anxiety and fear and guilt. And so now we have prepared a place for the truth that is true always, to land and to abide eternally with us. And in our last lesson in 151, we said that that is our resurrection. That true resurrection happens when the mind accepts and embraces the reality of its oneness with the Creator. True resurrection happens as we allow God to reinterpret all that we see, to judge all of the happenings that we observe. Our resurrection is in full gear when we are being taught the single lesson that is contained in everything, from the one frame of reference we call truth, or the one frame of reference we call God, or reality, or love. And here we teach only love, because love is all there is. We learn that the true resurrection that happens within our minds allows us to see only love, to see that which is only constant, unchanging. It allows us to see purity. We said on yesterday that only the pure in heart shall see reality. Jesus made that statement in Matthew chapter 6. The pure in heart shall see God. The pure in heart is the mind that has been resurrected to its original state of humility and surrender to the truth that is true always. And in this resurrected state, we will only see heaven's blessing upon the entire world. We see a forgiven world. We see a world that has been set free from its dream of damnation and destruction and despair and agony. We see in this resurrected mind our very own life. We see our own reality. And we see the face of Christ in everything and in everyone. Every thought is offered unto the Father of light, who transforms all our thoughts into the one perfect thought, which is his eternal love for us. That is the perfect thought. God's eternal love for all humanity is God's perfect thought. And as we move forward in our resurrection, see, we thought resurrection was only for Jesus. No, resurrection was for God and all creation. And as we accept that resurrection that has taken place and continue to take place within our minds to affect the way we think and the way we perceive, our journey now is about complete purification. It's about complete sanctification, where we understand now that we have been set apart. We have been put on full display. God's creation has been put on full display. Retranslation, where every thought that we ever thought is now being retranslated by truth itself. This is our Eastertide. This is the celebration that we have entered into. This is the rest for the people of God that Hebrews talked about. And as we embrace our own resurrection, that we move from glory to glory. Jesus called it transfiguration, that we've been transfigured, or we transcend the limitations of this world. We transcend the falsity of our body identification. We transcend time and space. We transcend form and have entered into the reality of who we are and our true identity. And this is the salvation. This is God's plan for salvation, where that all humanity, it is guaranteed that all humanity shall wake up, shall rise up, shall awaken, shall be born anew and afresh to come to experience its original state of creation, of oneness with the Father. It's about the Father and his creation. In traditional sense, we say the Father and his Son. But we don't get caught up in terminology here. We only get caught up in what? The truth that is true always. And so our salvation and our deliverance is a direct experience that we're having right now. And so in thanksgiving and in gratitude, we begin to, with the only response we know how. You know, John 3:16 says, God so loved the world that he gave. And so that is our response to this reality, to this resurrection, that we now respond with the only way we know how, and that is through service to all humanity. We become ministers, we become teachers, we become the light of the world, we become the saviors of the world to all humanity. And our message is that there is only truth, and in truth there is no illusions. There is no sickness, there's no sin, there's no death. There is no hell. There is only love. There are no opposites. There's only heaven. In truth, there are no opposites. There's only the love of the Father for the one being that he shared with all creation. And so in truth, there are no illusions. There are no opposites. There's nothing to fear. There is no lack. There's no scarcity. In reality, there is no sickness. There's no death. There's no beginning. There's no end. There's no separation. There's no loss. There's no sacrifice. All these concepts that we made up to be opposite to the truth. Well, we relinquish all those. And we stand in a certainty. We stand in a stability that's unmovable. And we become that immovable foundation that's always abounding in this service, in this work, in this ministry of love, in this ministry of reconciliation, where we now have joined as co-laborers with God in the plan of salvation. That it is the only plan of salvation, where God has reconciled all things back into himself. And so we carry this message of reconciliation. We carry this message of truth, where that peace that we all share, that peace that we were all searching for, that peace that passes understanding, that now through us into all the world, we share this peace that belongs to everyone. Love has forgotten no one. And so today and for the rest of our days, we offer every thought to the one that holds the one thought, and that is the eternal love that God is, and the eternal love that his creation is. That means you and me. And so I just share all that because that's what I got out of the last lesson. I don't know what you got, but that's what I got. And it fills my heart. It thrills my heart, and it fills my mind with joy and happiness and peace that passes all understanding. Yes, yes. So today's idea in lesson 152 states that the power of decision is my own. The power of decision is my own. And there's a lot in this lesson, so many themes. So we're going to jump right in and see what direction it goes in. But the power of decision is my own. No one can suffer loss unless it be his own decision. Notice what it says now, that no one can suffer unless it be his own decision. This sounds like a little about responsibility here. It says no one can suffer loss unless it be his own decision. No one suffers pain except his choice elects this state for him. Okay, this is getting real serious. But it's consistent. No one can grieve, nor fear, nor think him sick or think himself sick, unless these are the outcomes that he wants. And no one dies without his own consent. And then it concludes by saying, nothing occurs in our life but represents our own wish. And nothing is omitted that we choose. Oh my God. That's something we need to really pause and think about for a minute for what it's saying here. It says that nothing occurs within our life but that which represents our wish. And nothing is omitted that we choose. It says, here is your world, or here is your life, or here is what you have experienced in your life, complete in all its details. So it says here that here is the whole reality for ourselves as we have decided, as we have chosen. And it is only here that salvation is. It's only here that salvation is needed, because somewhere along the line, we have chosen for the life that we have experienced. We have chosen for every experience we have experienced according to the course here. And those choices are made both consciously and subconsciously. Our choice to enter into a world of dreams, our choice to enter into a dream of separation, our choice to hold a belief system that has its foundation in sin, consciousness, guilt, consciousness, and fear is but a choice for all of the possibilities that exists within that belief system. So we might say, well, I wouldn't choose for loss, or I wouldn't choose to suffer pain. You may say, well, I've never chosen to grieve or to be fearful or to think myself sick, or I wouldn't choose to die. But when we really sit back and think about the thoughts that we have entertained, when we really sit back and realize the conditioning that we have been so highly trained in by this world that has its basis in separation. But when you think about the words that we have spoken out of frustration and out of fear, when we think about how we have held others and what we have thought about others who we have felt that may have unfairly treated us at one time or another, when we think about the thoughts that we have thought about not only people but places and things and organizations and governments, when we really think about what has gone on within the mind that believe is separate, and a mind that believed in body identification, a mind that believed and held on to fear thoughts, unloving thoughts. When we think along those lines, we might really go back and read this and say, oh, this is the truth. That nothing has occurred but represents my wish or my thoughts. Because remember, when we think what we think about our brother, of what we would have for our neighbor, we have learned that we're having it for ourselves because there's only one of us. So any bad thought or any unloving thought that we've thought about any person, place, or thing, or organization, or whatever, we're having that for ourselves, then we will kind of say, okay, I realized that it was my decision. It was my choice. It was my thoughts. It must be what I wanted, because I wanted it out of ignorance, because I didn't realize. I did not realize that I was agreeing and participating in a thought system, an ego thought system, that has laws of sin and death, laws of that are based on a world that is built on the foundation of a big lie. And so now, as we read this again, we can kind of say, oh yeah, nothing occurred in my life but represent what I wished, and nothing is omitted that I have chosen. So all of our experiences, all our events, all our activities, all our everything that has happened in our timeline, everything that has arisen in our life, good or bad, happy or sad, the course is bringing us to a point here where we say these things have been our experience because they were our decision. And therefore, we have to take full responsibility for our entire life. In truth, we cannot blame external factors, external circumstances for our condition, for our experience. We have to take full responsibility. But the good news is that within all of that, God was at work to will and to do of his good pleasure, and was there in response to our what decisions, wherever they may have been, guiding and directing, redirecting, bringing all of that activity and still landing you in a safe place. Because now we understand from being in this training for 152 days that God is the one who wills only good for us. Only good. To will and to good. See, it says to will and to do of his good pleasure. Even in our ignorance, even in our state of dreaming of separation, even in our state of hallucination, even in our state of making a concept of ourselves that is totally false, God was still at work in every situation, circumstance in our life, every activity, every event, every thought, every feeling, every emotion, every part of our life, nothing excluded. God was at work to bring us to a state of awakening, to bring us to this state of resurrection. Why? That is the example of the eternal love that God has towards his creation, that he has towards you and me. And it's wonderful. Even in our ignorance. And so nothing occurred but represents our wish, and nothing is omitted that we choose. Here is your world complete in all details. It is its whole reality for you, and it is only here that salvation is what needed. The whole time this was going on, we were blinded to it, of the choices that we were making, the decisions that we were making, calling these experiences to ourselves. We was blind to the reality that God's plan for salvation was already at work. Guaranteed that some way, somehow, that it will be worked out, that eventually you and me and all humanity will eventually wake up to the truth that is true always. Will eventually wake up to the reality of who we are, that we are the very extension of our Father, that we share the same being that God is, that we have equality with God, that we've always been this one self that God is, that is birthless, that is deathless, that has no beginning and no end, that is formless, that is timeless. He, she, it has been working it out from days of ancient times. And so you may believe that this position is extreme, what I just said, the position that nothing occurred but represents our own wish. Well, let's stick with it. Let's see where it's going to take us. It says, you may think that this position is extreme and too inclusive to be true. Because what it's saying here is that all our experiences are our choices and our decisions. At some level, we chose them. At some level, we decided for them. It says, yet, can truth have exceptions? This is a rhetorical question. Can that which is true have exceptions? No, if it had exception, it wouldn't be true. It would have to be all inclusive. There are no exceptions in truth. If there's one exception, then it's not true. There is no exceptions in God. There is no exception in love. Because God is truth. God is love. And in reality, there's no exception in you. And that's what we're waking up to, this reality. That all of that experience, all of the experiences that we had, where there were exceptions, where there are opposites, a life of opposites and exceptions, that only happens in dreams. That only happens in a state of separation, in vain imaginings. It only happens in a world of separation. So that can't be a part of the truth. Why? Because the truth, like it says here, the truth has no exceptions. It says, if you have had the gift of everything, like the Bible says that all things are ours. So if we have that gift of everything, it says, if you've had the gift of everything, can loss be real? No. If you have everything, can loss be real? No, it cannot be. Why? There's no opposite to the truth that what all things are ours. It says, can pain be a part of peace? If there's peace, can there be pain? No. There's no pain in peace. See, there's no exceptions. That's what he's bringing out here. He says, can there be grief and joy? Absolutely not. There is no joy in grief. It says, can fear and sickness enter into a mind where love and perfect holiness abides? Is that possible? No, it's not. Why? There's no exception. It says truth must be all inclusive. Truth must be all inclusive. Now we've been taught here. Now we're right in the middle of we've gotten deep down into teaching here. See, the truth as we have known it, or the truth that the world will have shown us, is fickle. We're not talking about that truth. We're not talking about facts that our eyes or our ears may try to convince of us. We're not talking about partial evidence. We're not talking about wrong judgment where we don't have all the information. Here, where we're talking about the truth that God is. We're talking about the truth that has no opposite. We're talking about truth that has no exception. We're talking about truth, as it says here, must be all inclusive. So if we make one exception, it's not true. That's why love has forgotten no one. Because if love has forgotten anyone, then it's not love. That's why God said that he was in Christ reconciling what? The entire world to himself. That means that what? None is excluded. But we live in a world that would teach us. We live in religious communities, places of faith that would teach you that some is not reconciled. Some will not make it. Some will burn eternally. Some will, all of the things, all of the exceptions, all of the exceptions that we make. This is not coming from truth. This is coming from a thought system that has its basis in belief in separation. We call it the ego thought system. And it made its way into our culture, into our religions, into our systems of government. It's made its way in all the world. And it presented this false representation of what truth is. And that's what we have been highly developed in. That's what we, have lived by. That's what we have allowed to be a part of even our own identification. But here the Course is making it very plain, making it very simple. It says, truth must be all inclusive. If it be the truth at all, it's all inclusive. Except no opposites and no exceptions. For to do so is to contradict the truth entirely. If there's one exception, see, we live in a world of exceptions. We make exceptions. But in reality, there are no exceptions. The truth is true always. And so salvation, from God's point of reference or point of view, so true salvation is the recognition. True salvation is when we recognize that the truth is true and nothing else is true. That's what true salvation is. Because without the all-inclusiveness, without the guarantee that truth is unalterable and unchangeable, we have nothing to stand on that is certain. Truth established the certainty of our identity. Truth establishes the certainty of God's identity. Truth establishes the certainty and the guarantee that there's only the will of God that shall prevail in everything. Everything. And so it says, salvation is the recognition that truth is true and nothing else is true. This you have heard before, but may not yet accept that reality. It says truth cannot have an opposite. Remember when we started, like the first part of our training, I would go over the section in the front of the Course in Miracles that talked about what the Course says. And in that, if you can remember, we talked about that at the very beginning, the Course makes a fundamental difference between that which is real and that which is not. Why? Because the whole foundation, the whole basis of reality, the whole basis of any certainty has to be the basis that what? There is reality. And there is nothing else. That God is, and there is nothing else. That seems to be something else is what the Course called that which is unreal. And so right off the bat, we said that reality has to do with that which is real, meaning that which is permanent, that which is knowledge, God's knowledge, that which is truth. And truth is that which what has no opposites. That which is true, that which it has no exceptions. It's all inclusive. It's all encompassing. That which is one law, which is the law of love or the law of God. We said that reality is that which is unalterable, meaning it's unchangeable. It cannot change. It's changeless. We said that it's eternal. That means you cannot find its beginning nor its end. It's always been. Reality always been. Truth always been. And then we said that it is unambiguous, meaning there are not multiple choices. There is no choice. In reality, there is no choice. It just is. And then we said that it can be unrecognized. Here it says that truth is recognition. Right here it says salvation is the recognition. But here it says that reality can be unrecognized, but it cannot be changed. In other words, we can be oblivious to it. We can ignore it. We can build fences up to keep it out of our thinking, out of our awareness, out of our consciousness, but it doesn't change reality. It doesn't change God. It doesn't change love. It doesn't change God's plan for salvation. It doesn't change our creation, who we've been, how and what and why that we've been. We are the what? We are the creation of God. Can't change any of that. We said that reality is everything that God created. And we know God created the one thing, and that was himself. And he calls himself the I am. And that's you and me. Not the body I am, not the time and space I am, but the eternal one being that God is. That is who we are. It is only God and it's only love that creates reality. Nothing else does. There's only the mind of God. There's only the thought of God. And so everything outside of that would have to be a dream or a trance or an hallucination or wild imaginings or fantasies. And in those state of beings, the truth is still true. God is not what? God is not mocked. So we would have to be in a state of sleep or state of dreaming to experience what seems to be separate or outside of reality. And then we went on to say that reality is beyond learning. It's beyond what we can learn. It's beyond learning. It's not something that you learn. It's something that you are. It's something that you know. And that we have forgotten. But it's there. It's present. It's been just covered up. It's been blocked up. It's been veiled. And the only thing that needs to happen is what? To be unveiled. To see and to come to agreement that reality has not been changed. And again, we said it is beyond time and space. That which is real is beyond the time and space experience that humanity is having. It has no opposites. It has no beginning, and it has no end. Reality merely is. And so we made that distinction when we first started these lessons 150 something days ago, that the Course makes a fundamental distinction between that which is real and that which is not. Why? Because that is the basis. Reality is the basis for everything. And we have to know there is not the truth and there is not false. There's no opposite. There's just the truth only. And so what the Course has done is the Course has placed everything under the category of ego that would appear or that would seemingly be opposite or anti-reality. So we just category all of it on the ego. That is the ego, meaning that is a false idea that was made out of a thought of separation. And in that thought, the entire world was created out of that thought of separation. Because it's going to talk about here that it's going to set the record straight on who created this world, who made this world. We think God did, but this lesson is going to set that straight. And then it goes on to say that that's reality. He said, but on the other hand, there's this world of perception that we find ourselves in. This world of perception, where there's a subject and an object. There's a subject and an object. There's duality. There's opposites. There's up and down and in and out. There's polarity. We find ourselves in this world in this universe where there's laws where there's change and there's patterns and there's levels and there's dimensions and all of this stuff that we hear and been taught about this world. Is this the world? Is this the world that God would make? Is this what truth would manifest? Remember, in truth, in reality, every seed produces after its own kind. So God being the seed of himself, what would he produce? Would he produce a world that we kind of like have, kind of checked out? We're going to get into that. What it says in the world of perception. It's a world of time and space, a world of beginning and ending, a world that comes and goes. In this life, things are always coming and going all the time. Things are changing every minute. This world is based on interpretations and not on facts. Everything is about interpretation. Everything is about perception. This is the world of perception. It's a world of birth and death. We see it all around us. It's founded on the belief in scarcity, loss, separation, and death. We see it all around us. It's learned. It's learned. It says that this world is learned. He said it's selective in its emphasis, meaning you got all these options, smorgasbords. It says that in the world of perception, it is unstable in its functioning. We know what instability looks like. It says it is inaccurate in all of its interpretations. So this, on the other hand, from reality, this is what the Course says. This is what the unreal. Not that it's opposite, is it? But this is what it looks like. But it's not real. So there is no opposite in reality. But this is what it looks like. This is what the world of duality looks like. But we find ourselves in having this human experience. And so it says it is in this world of unreality that salvation is recognized. That's where it's needed. In reality, there is no need for salvation because nothing changes. Everything remains in its pristine state, even you and me. It says salvation is the recognition that the truth is true and nothing else is true. Truth cannot have an opposite. It says, for if what is not true is true, as well as what is true, then part of the truth becomes false. And truth now is unstable. So only truth is true, and that's it. And truth has lost its meaning. If part of it is false. It says nothing but the truth is true, and what is false is false. Nothing but reality is real, and what is unreality is unreality. And so there's a foundation being built here where this lesson is bringing us to the awareness that every decision that we make is our very own. And if we're making decisions where the truth is not the foundation of our decision, then yes, we get to experience these things that we would not want to experience. Like suffering and pain and loss. That's because we're making decisions based on unreality, that they're opposites. It says this is the simplest of distinctions, yet it is the one that is most covered up or most obscure. To distinguish between reality and unreality, between truth and false, is the simplest. of distinction. However, in the world of perception, in the dream world of separation, that is what's covered up. That is what blinds the mind of humanity. That have caused us to make a world that is full of inequality, a world that is full of lack and scarcity, a world that is full of fear, a world that is where you are taught that you are separate from God, that you are a sinner, where fear and guilt pervades and is on full view within the mind of one that believes he's separate. Could God make such a world? Could truth make such a world? Could reality create such a world? It's impossible. It says, but not because it is difficult. It is a difficult distinction to perceive. It is concealed behind a vast array of choices that do not appear to be entirely your own. They don't appear to be our own. It says, and thus the truth appears to have some aspect that belie consistency. So we have accepted the reality or the unreality that truth has some inconsistency, and it doesn't, because we build our own systems where there's exceptions to the truth. We build our own systems of governments, our own systems, our own societies. We build our own cultures where the lie, where the false and the lie is a part of the truth. We did this, and we're still doing it, and we see it on full display right now. And you see the trouble, you see the pain and the suffering and the death and all of that comes out of that. You see it on full display right now. But don't be discouraged. It is coming to pass. Why? Because only the will of God shall prevail. So be not dismayed. The same way it came in, it's got to go out. The same way the lie came into the mind of humanity, it's got to go out. Where? Through the mind of humanity. So what we see on display is an exodus, an exodus of the unreality. We have to be able to stand in the place of truth and wave bye-bye. It's a way to look at it that is, comforting. There's no need to be fretting and sad and anguish and afraid. No. That means you're still embracing. That means you're still embracing the belief in separation. Just a little bit, but we're cleaning that all up. So, it says, as God created you. How did God create you? It says, as God created you, you must remain unchangeable. Right, because he created you in truth. He created you as himself. He created you by extending his very own self. And so that means that the nature that God is the nature that we are. That is, the being that God is the being that we are. That means that the life that God is the life that we are. And that life and that being and that nature is what? Unchangeable. We remain as God created us, whole and complete, one with our Creator, with all the characteristics of what I read here about what is real. We are created as reality. We've been created in the knowledge of God. We have been created in truth under one law, the law of love. We are unalterable. We are what? Eternal, unambiguous. We are changeless. God is our only creation. God is our only reality. We're created in love. We are beyond time and space. We are what? We have no opposites. We are what? We have no beginning and we have no end. We merely are just as God is. That is our truth. That is our reality. And when we don't embrace that as our own, there's no other option but to be in a state of sleep, to be in a state of dreaming. And the only thing that needs to happen is for what? For us to wake up from the dream. And guess what? Even in the dream of separation, truth abides there. The remembrance of the truth is there. And that's what wakes us up. So even as I share these lessons, these advanced lessons, they are designed to help wake all of us up to the reality of our reality in God, that God is our identity. We are not something separate from our Father, but we are one with our Father who loves us eternally. That makes us what? Eternal love. That is what you are. And so, as God created you, you must remain unchangeable. With transitory states, by definition, false. You're not a transitory reality. You are a permanent reality. Though we are having this experience in this seemingly transitory world, it doesn't change our original state. It doesn't change our reality that we are permanent beings. We are eternal beings. So that means that all the shifts that we experience, all the feelings, all the alterations and conditions that we engage in, that all the alterations in the body, all the different changes that we go through in these bodies, all these, we see the body goes from infantry, or being an infant, to being what? Of old age, and eventually what? Being laid to rest. Even in all those shifts and changes, even in all those conditions of the body and the mind goes through these weird seasons of thoughts. Mind has been all over the place in a state of separation. It says, even in all of this, in all the awareness, and in all response, we remain unchanged. We remain unchanged on all of that. Even when we were thinking that we were that. Still, the majority of humanity thinks that it is its body, it is its thoughts, it is all the changes that it goes through. It is all its shifts, all its feelings, all its emotions. It believes that it is its race, it is its gender, it is its body, it's its political affiliation, it's its religious affiliation, it is its national affiliation. Humanity still puts stock and credence in that as being their identity. Therefore, therein lies the suffering. That's why there's so much suffering in the dream. It's a misidentification that we have embraced and have forgotten our true identity. But cheer up, I'm here to remind you. It says, this is the all-inclusiveness which sets the truth apart from falsehood, and the false kept separate from the truth and what it is. So here is saying that truth is all inclusive. All that God is all that we are. And everything else that's in a state of seeming, a state of dreaming, a state of hallucination, a state of separation, all the other it has no basis for reality. None. So it is not. So the conclusion is that it is not strange that you believe to think you made the world you see is arrogant. That was what he said here. That we think is arrogance for us to think that we made the world. He said, but God made it not. Uh-oh. I know what we've been taught. It says, but God made the world as we know it not. Of this you can be sure. He said it's a certainty that God didn't make the world that we're experiencing. So if God didn't make the world, who made it? We made it through our decisions, our belief in separation. Truth cannot be, remember, there's no exceptions. It can't be a part of that. There's no opposite. So we would have to, what? In a dreamlike state, create a world that is built on separation and division, built on fear, built on lack and scarcity. We did it. We miscreated the world. In a dream of separation, we did this. If you embrace that truth is true, that only truth is true, then we would have to have done it. When I say we, that means the collective mind is separated from God. And that's the whole metaphor. That's the whole symbolism that you see in the story, the creation story in Genesis. That's the whole symbolism. That's the whole metaphor that you see in the story of the prodigal son. In both cases, God had provided only the truth, only reality. God had provided a place and a space where there was nothing needed, where there was nothing missing, nothing broken. Everything was in bliss. But then man, or the son, decided through a thought that there's something else. There must be something else. And they both exited it. They both went on a journey to find something else. And thus the suffering began. So that's all symbolic of what I'm talking about here. So in our collective tiny mad idea that separation was possible, we fell into a dream or a trance and went on the journey. It's called sleep. We fell asleep and dreamed of a world of separation, and thus we see what we made. Truth could not have made this. Truth could not make a world that was where there's death, where there's birth, where there's destruction, there's sickness and there's disease, and there's poverty, and there's hatred, and there's bitterness, and there's inequality, and there's racial superiority, inferiority. A world where there's systems and where there's ideas that divide and separate and subdivide and separate and subdivide again. A world where there's vitriol and hatred. Truth could not create that. Oh. So he says, God made it not. Of this you can be sure of. Now, this may be a whole new concept to you if you're listening to me, but it was a whole new concept to me when I first had to face the truth. But by this time, if you've been with us, you should already have come to that conclusion. That the world, the life, the world that I've made, the life that I have made, it really came down to my decisions. Everything that I have presently, everything that I have experienced, all the results that I have, it really came down to my own decisions. So to be completely honest, we have to be completely honest with ourselves. To embrace the truth, you have to be completely honest and take full responsibility for everything. So that means what? We release everybody and everything. We release everybody and everything. And it just comes down now to me and God. It comes down now to me and the truth. Whether I embrace it, welcome it, or I continue to build fence to keep it out. It says, what can he know, or what can truth know? What can God know of the ephemeral? What can God know of the temporary? God is permanent. What can he know of the ephemeral? That word ephemeral means it's only short-lived. What can God know of the short-lived? What can eternity know of the short-lived? Can't know it. It says, what can God know of sin and guilt? That which is true, that which is pure, that which is innocent. What can it know of sin and guilt? What can God know of being afraid? He says, what could God know of suffering and loneliness? And the mind that lives without a body that must die. What can God know of that? To create something like that. Do you think God hold these kind of thoughts? You think love hold these kind of thoughts? You think truth hold these kind of thoughts? Remember, there are no opposites in truth. It says, we but accuse God of being insane. Yeah, because we see this world that in many cases is insane of what happens in this world. It's an insane world. When you look at it, from a place of light. He says, you but accuse God of insanity to think he made a world where such things seem to have reality. That's why a lot of us don't have anything. A lot of people in the world, they say, don't have anything to do with God. A God that would make a world like this, a God would allow people to suffer, a God that would allow this to happen and that to happen, school shootings, mass shootings, a God that would let this and that happen. And so people say, I don't have anything to do with God. Or people who have something to do with God, they're afraid of God because they see the insanity in this world. Like, God made a crazy world. But now we're coming to see the truth. That it is impossible for God to have created such a place. It says, God made it not. Of this you can be sure. It says, You but accuse him of insanity to think that he made a world where such things seem to have reality. God is not mad. He is not mad. Yet only madness makes a world like this. And where did the madness come from? Came from our belief in separation, that we're separated from our Creator and separated from one another. And you see it play out in the world that you've been visiting, for however long you've been visiting, and for how many times you have visited this place. But it's okay. We are waking up. We're allowing the mind to be what? Resurrected to the truth. To think that God made chaos. He's describing the world that we see. To think that God made chaos contradicts his very own will. God is not the author of confusion. To think that he invented opposites to truth. To think that he suffers death to triumph over life. All this is arrogance, to think that way. If we think that God made the world, the Course says that's arrogance. And what it's going to tell you is that it is not arrogance to say that we made the world. That's humility. To say that we made the world, that's really that's humility, because we did. Knowingly or unknowingly, we did. And we still make it every day by our choices, by our decisions, by our thoughts, by our perceptions. What is the foundation of our reality? What thought system are we operating in? Are we operating in the thought system of God or in the thought system of the ego? It says humility would see at once that these things are not of God. Humility would see that a world of chaos, a world of opposites, a world that suffers death to triumph over life, that would see that all these things, it says humility would see that all these things are not of God. It says, and can you see what God created not? Can we see what God created not? In other words, it says to think that you can see what God created not is merely to believe that you can perceive what God willed not to be. And what could be more arrogant than to think this way? We're down in the nitty gritty now. Somebody's waking up. So, in conclusion, and that's what the lesson is about here. It's about humility and arrogance. What's real humility? Humility is what? Aligning with the truth. Arrogance is aligning with the false. So he's saying that we are arrogant when we say that God made the world, which is totally opposite of the truth. And it says that we are humble when we say that we did it, when we take responsibility for the mess that we made. That's just what it's saying here. And all this is founded on the foundation that truth is true and nothing else is true. That there is no opposite. That truth is truth and false is false. And that's it. There are no exceptions. Truth is all inclusive. And that what God is and what God have created has not been affected, has not been altered or changed by any of the falsity, any of the dreams, any of the hallucinations, any of the vain imaginings, as much as the ego thought system have tried to make unreality reality. It has not changed reality. That's why the Course boldly says that you must accept. If you're going to have any peace at all, you must accept the reality that you remain as God created you. As an innocent, whole and complete, eternal being that shares all that God is. That you must accept your equality with God. You must accept your eternalness if you're going to have any lasting peace. You have not been altered. You have not been changed by any of the dreams, any of the falsehoods, any of the wrong decisions that we've made, any of the lies that we have held. It hasn't changed anything. It only have created a seeming experience of suffering. And that's the suffering we see in the world in many different ways, many different forms. From mental, the psychological, the physical, the social, economical, all the suffering on every level and every form is an effect. It's not a cause. There are effects of a belief in a tiny man idea of separation. And that's what needs to be healed. That's what we need to wake up from and reconnect with the truth that is true always. And so today, we practice true humility. See, we've been trained in humility. The world had taught us about arrogance and humility that is totally outside of what the truth is. Real humility is just embracing that which is true, that which is real. It's submission. That's what it is. We submit ourselves to the truth. That's humility. That's real humility. Submitting ourselves to the truth. When we submit ourselves to a lie, that's not humility. That's arrogance. When we allow within our belief system that we are sinners, when we allow in our system that God is an unloving father in any way, on any level, when we allow within our belief system that God holds any unloving thoughts about himself or about us, when we hold within our belief system that God is requiring some kind of sacrifice from us, what the Course saying is that's arrogance, because we're holding to a lie. And we have made so many rituals, so many requirements, and put them on the truth. Blame them on God. Blame God for everything. And we've done that. And we're suffering because of it. But true humility is when we embrace the truth that is true always. When we wake up, when we allow the plan of salvation to bring us to a place of awareness, to where our minds now become resurrected to the reality of truth only. where we allow God to reinterpret everything for us, where we let go of all that we've made and only embrace that what God created. Now we're on the right track. And so it says, today we practice true humility, abandoning the false pretense or the false pretenses by which the ego seeks to prove its arrogance. See, when we allow the world to have trained us in the ego thought system, it is all an attempt to cover up the truth. And it comes out in an arrogant way by which what we promote or become promoters of separation, become the promoters of inequality, become promoters of what you see happening in the world, where there's oppression, where humanity is oppressing one another in any form, where there is greed, where there's this pretense, like what's going on here currently in 2022, this pretense. And it's all now have circled in politics. People are choosing sides. It's all circling in religions, where people are choosing sides. He says, only the ego can be arrogant. Only the ego's thought system can be arrogant. But truth is humble in acknowledging its mightiness, its changelessness, and its eternal wholeness. It's all-encompassing nature, where there's no exceptions. It says God's perfect gift to his beloved Son. That's humility. To acknowledge your changelessness, to acknowledge your innocence, your wholeness, your completeness, to acknowledge your sinlessness, to acknowledge your guiltlessness, to acknowledge your eternal state, to acknowledge the fact that you are unaltered, that you are unblemished by any of what has been on display, that you remain as God created you. That is true humility. To acknowledge your oneness with God. To acknowledge that all humanity is guiltless. And that the whole world is free. That's what Paul meant when he said God had committed to him the ministry of reconciliation, and that God had in God, the message of reconciliation, in that God has reconciled all the world back into himself. God had gone into the dream through the person of Jesus and fulfilled the requirement of the dream. And once the fulfillment of the dream was done, the dream vanished into thin air. And so what we see now is just a residual of sin consciousness, where we're no longer under the law. We're no longer under the laws of the dream of separation. But we're all about the original, what he called grace. That we have that we now can return to our place of holiness and wholeness and completeness, our original state, our original habitat. Like the prodigal son come home. God is calling all humanity come home. Drop the dream, drop the illusions, drop the misperceptions. Put down your guns, your weapons. They're no longer needed. Love has triumphed over hatred. Life has triumphed over death. That becomes your lived experience once you make those down this, because those decisions, like it says here, the power of decision is your own. You're still making a decision. What decision are you making? Are you experiencing the peace of God? Are you experiencing the oneness with humanity? Do you see the face of Christ in all humanity? That lets you know where you're making your decision. Is it still based on the false, the unreal, or is it based on the truth? He said, we lay aside the arrogance which says that we are sinners, see, that we are guilty, that we are afraid, that we are ashamed of what we are, and we lift our hearts to true humility, instead to him who has created us. How? Immaculate. He's created us. How? Immaculate. We turn to him who has created us immaculate. You're fearfully and wonderfully made, as the prophet said. He says, who created us immaculate, like to himself, in power and in love. This is who we are. Guiltless, sinless, higher than the heavens is who we are. He said the power of decision is our own. So what are you going to decide? You're still deciding, and you're still having what you're deciding. Is your mind at peace? Is your perception of oneness? Do you see the face of Christ in all humanity? Or are you still judging based on what? Partial information? Are you judging based on what you can see with your eyes and hear with your ears? Are you still making decisions based on your gender, based on your nationality, based on your political affiliation, based on your religious affiliation, based on your race, based on what your family taught you, based on what this nation has taught you, based upon history, based upon your ancestors? Are you still making decisions based on those things? Here it says that if we are, we're being arrogant because we're making them based on that which is false. And he said, now humble yourself and make a decision about the truth of who you are, that you are the immaculate, created one of God, that you are created like unto himself. You are himself. You share the same self that God is. That you are powerful beyond measure and in love. That is who we are. It says the power of decision is our own, and we accept him which we are. We accept him which we are. Jesus said it this way: as I am and where I am, so are ye in this world. I and you and me, we're one. It's all through scripture. It's all through New Testament scripture. This reality of oneness. This reality that Jesus done away with sin, guilt, and fear. Why are we still holding on to the residual? Why is there sin consciousness? And so he said, the power of decision is our own, and we accept of him that which we are, and humbly recognize that we are the sons and daughters. We are the offspring of truth that is true always, and will remain that way. To recognize God's creation implies as well that all our self-concepts of ourself that we made have been laid aside and recognized as false. Remember, we said that enlightenment is but a recognition. Awareness. To awake is to recognize the truth. And here today it says that salvation is a recognition. And what is a recognition? Well, we recognize something. We remember something. To recognize is to remember the original. Oh, yes, I remember. That's what Jesus meant when he said, do this what? In remembrance of me. He wasn't talking about him personally. He was talking about in remembrance of truth. The symbols and the act of communion is that we're one. That we're one body, that we're one life, that we're one entity. God is not something separate from us, but God is who we are. We are not something separate from God, but God is who we are. God is our only identity and what we have made. Here it says what? Lay it aside and recognize it as false. It says, their arrogance has been perceived. And in humility, the radiance of God's creation, which is you and me, has gentleness. It says the radiance of God's creation, which is you and me, which is his gentleness and his perfect sinlessness, his father love, his right to heaven and release from hell are joyously accepted as our own. So we joyously accept the reality of our truth, and we release ourselves and our brothers from the hell that they thought that they were in, or the hell that they thought they deserved. No one deserved that. That's only in a mind of separation. That's only in a mind, a religious mind, that has yet accept the atonement for itself. But we still establish fear-based theology that requires or say that there is a difference, and there is no difference. That say that there is an exception. There is no exception. That would say that there is specialness. That's special. That's for a few, only a few. There is no specialness. There's no exception. God is all-inclusive. Love has forgotten no one. And until we embrace that reality, we will suffer mentally and psychologically, individually and collectively. But God has given us this ministry of reconciliation. God has given us this ministry of purification, sanctification, retranslation. This ministry of transfiguration and salvation and deliverance. This ministry of thanksgiving. This ministry that the truth has no illusions. That the peace of God through us belongs to everyone. Now do we join in glad acknowledgement that lies are false and only truth is true. We think of truth along as we arise and spend 5 minutes today practicing its ways, encouraging our frightened mind with this. So the mind that has been frightened of this truth and had built fences to keep the truth out. Today we arise and practice and encourage that mind by saying this: the power of decision is my own. This day I will accept myself as what my Father's will created me to be. This we do today. This we practice today. Then we will wait in silence, giving up all self-deception as we humbly ask ourself, our true self, that he reveal himself to us. And he who never left will come again to our awareness, to our consciousness, grateful to restore his home to God and it as it was meant to be. So this journey that we've been on is really a journey without a distance. Why? Because God is always there. Who we have been is always there. It's always been intact. Nothing really has happened. That's what the atonement means. Nothing happened. Humanity remains in the garden. The prodigal son remains at home. It was only a dream. That's what the atonement is. The truth is truth. And nothing has been altered or changed. I remain as my Father created me, holy and without blame in love, irreprovable, unblameable in his sight. In patience, we wait for him throughout the day and hourly invite him with the words with which the day began, concluding it with this same invitation to ourself. God's voice will answer, for he speaks for you and for your Father. He will substitute the peace of God for all of our frantic thoughts, the truth of God for our self-deceptions, and God's Son, God's daughter, God's creation for our illusions of ourself. So in closing, the power of decision is our own. It's no one else's. The choice is ours. This day, we will accept ourselves as what our Father wills, or our Father's will created us to be. And thus, I rest my case. Workbook lesson 152. What a thrill. Lot to think about. So as you go through your day, think on these things and the voice that speaks for God. We allow that voice to speak for us, which knows only the truth that is true always. And so we are at home where God would have us be. Thank you so much. Have a blessed rest of your day. And we continue this journey on tomorrow. Bye-bye.